I get questions all the time about pantsing. Michael, you write without an outline. How do you do this? Michael, how do you think about this? So I thought it would be a great idea to put together a video of the top questions I get on pantsing and answer them. But before we do that, just wanted to let you know that I do have a book that gathers all of my experiences and recommendations on how to write a novel without an outline. And it's called The Pocket Guide to Pantsing: How to Write a Novel Without an Outline with Confidence. You can get your copy at authorlevelup.com/pantsing. Links are in the description. First question: how much planning or pre-planning do I do when I am writing my novels without outline, since I don't write with any structure anymore? All I do is I get to the point where I know what the first scene is going to be. And the first scene is always a hero in a setting with a problem. That's it. Where's my hero? Where are they at? How do they feel about where they're at? And what is the problem that they're dealing with? All right, that's the only thing I allow myself to see. Now, I may see some other things, like I may know who the villain is going to be. I may know who the supporting character is going to be. I may see some associated scenes from the novel, but I really don't know what's going to happen other than that hero in a setting with a problem. And that is as much pre-planning as I do. Next question: what are the problem spots in a novel when you're writing without an outline, and how do you overcome those spots? I recently did a video on how to overcome the 1/3 mark of any novel. And I have found over the years that it's the 1/3 mark, usually right around the 25% to 35% mark of the novel, when things just, you just can't see anything anymore. You're humming along. You've got through that honeymoon phase. Everything is feeling great. You're feeling great about yourself, great about the story, and then boom, you hit a wall. And you don't know what's going to happen next. You can't see what's going to happen next. The panic sets in. You start questioning whether you should have been doing this in the first place. And what a lot of people don't realize is that this is a normal part of the creative process. And I talk about my thoughts, particularly one philosophy that I have about this, in that video. So you can watch that by clicking the YouTube card above my head, and I'll also link to it in the video description. But the 1/3 mark is the trouble spot that many people get stuck in. There is no novel I have written at this point where I have been completely devastated by this mark, and the strategies in that video will help you overcome that mark. How do I know how long the novel is going to be if I don't outline it? The answer is I don't. And the other answer is I'm okay with that. The other part is that this is a very difficult part for many writers, particularly people who have never written without an outline before, to let go of, because we are taught, we think that we have to know how long a novel is going to be, and if a book is not within that range, then we're so scared that readers are never going to buy it. And that's just not true. I write novels. I sit down and I just sit down and write. And then what I end up with at the end of the novel is what I end up with. Almost all the time, 9 out of 10 times, I usually end up between 40 and 50,000 words. Sometimes I may end up a little bit less than that. Sometimes I may end up a little bit more than that. At the end of the day, I don't care. I'm still going to publish it, and I'm still going to call it a novel as long as it's, over 30,000 words. Some people might disagree with that, but I can tell you one thing: my readers don't comment on the length of my story. And I think that that's going to be true of you as well. All they care about is whether the story is complete. If the story is complete and you did what you needed to do, then it's okay if some of your novels are shorter than others, because at the end of the day, they're there for the character. I know that there are going to be still people that listen to me and say, nope, I don't agree with that. That doesn't make sense. And that's fine. But if you're one of those people that just cannot get over the length thing, how long the novel is, this method is probably not for you. How do you world build when you are writing without an outline? Because intuitively, most people would think that when you want to build a world and craft story details and setting details, you would want to do that before the novel starts. And that's actually not true. I mean, you can absolutely do it by the seat of your pants. The long-term trick that I've learned is to track the details as they happen. So as a character, say a character enters a new scene, and you describe it in XYZ terms, all right? What you do is you track those details so that you can always remember that this particular scene was set in XYZ. All right. You can always add more details and build on later, but if you track your details as you go, you would actually be surprised how much world building actually happens on the page in real time. There's certain elements of world building that you can plan for, but I found, and I've created pretty rich worlds that my readers have loved without having to sit down and map out everything that's going to happen. So if you're one of those people that thinks that you can only world build ahead of time, give it a try as you go. Another benefit of world building as you go is that everything that you build ends up in the story. Whereas when you outline and you build your world ahead of time, you may do a lot of world building that never ends up in your story. And for some authors, that time and effort that they spend ahead of the time can actually be quite substantial. When you world build as you go, all of your world building ends up in the story, and it's a more efficient way to do things. Next, you're probably thinking, well, Michael, how do you keep track of those details? Like, how do you do it? Like the technical nuts and bolts part. Let's jump over to my computer and I'll show you how I track the details, not only in world building, but all of the events in my novels. I am inside Microsoft Excel, which is my chosen tool to use outlines. Now, I used to do this in Scrivener. You can do this in Scrivener. Some people don't like to use Excel for these sorts of things, but I think it's perfect, and I'll show you why. Now, over here, what I have, I'll zoom in just a little bit so it can make it a little bit easier to see. So I've got some different columns in this spreadsheet. So I'll just go from left to right. I've got the book, which is pretty self-explanatory. This is book 1 and then chapter 1 in column B. And then what I like to do is I like to put a brief summary of what happened. Not a full summary, I'll do that later, but I'll do a brief summary so that this is just a quick glance, real easy. If I am needing to remember what happened, I can just look at this brief summary, and 9 times out of 10, this will help me remember what happened. All right. And then what I do is I capture the setting. This is real easy, depends on where it is. And then I do setting detail. All right. So in the spirit world here, I've got some different bullet points. You can tell I haven't been terribly consistent how I formatted this. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. All right. So I put down the details that I use to describe the spirit world in this particular section here. And these are things that are important to know that help paint the picture of what the place looks like. All right. And then what I can do, the reason I do it this way, is if I click this filter button here, then I can go in and I can type in spirit world, and I can pull up all of the chapters in the book that where the spirit world appears. And so if I scroll down a little bit, then you can see I built some more details in the world here. All right. So you're just consistently adding details to the world, and as you do that, you throw it in the setting description. All right. That's how I do it, and that helps me keep things straight. So then if I want to search for chapters with a certain character, for example, I can search for all chapters with my character Bo, and then this will give me, as I scroll down here, all the chapters with Bo in it. All right. And then that's just helpful when I want to keep track of a character's details or their actions over time. All right. And then I've got the character details here. I can also filter in the same way. And then I just write down all the details that I put down for the character. All right. And then over here, I've got a detailed summary. Most of the time, this is going to be a lot longer than what I have over in column C. I usually will take my time and spend as much time as possible detailing what happened. The way I think about it is that you're never going to remember your chapters as much as when you've just written it. So I stop and I take my time going through this, and then that way I know it's captured correctly, it's captured forever. And then if I need some more details about what happened in a particular scene, I can come over to chapter H. All right. Now this is how I do these outlines. Is it perfect? No. Is it a little clunky? Yes. I happen to like it a lot better than Word because I can search, or than Scrivener because I can do better searches with this. But there are other ways you could do this as well. One of the things I've experimented with a new series I'm writing is keeping, because you can tell the formatting here is kind of crazy. So, and the reason for that is because mostly it's because of column G and E. What I've been experimenting with is pulling these out, like these columns out, and then throwing them into another tab, throwing them into their own setting tab, like a setting description tab and a character description tab. And then that way it just makes the rest of the outline a little bit easier to read. So you can experiment with this, figure out how you want to do it. There are writing apps that allow you to keep track of character details and setting details. Papyrus Author is a really good example of this, where you can keep all of this information in a character or a setting database, and then you can pull that up at will. So I'll link to a Papyrus Author video where you can see that in action. That's a great app that can help you with this as well if Microsoft Excel or tracking this all in a single document is not your cup of tea. Next, what about character sheets? As I said with world building, I build my characters as I go. This takes a certain amount of belief and faith in story, and it's not always easy for people when they start off, but once you finish your first novel, it's amazing how much confidence that gives you in building your characters. All right, so it's the same with world building. There's a lot of time and effort you can spend before you write a novel crafting characters and researching details and coming up with all these details and character narratives and things that never end up in your story. Now, for some writers, they find that helpful because it's a discovery process. Even if it doesn't end up in their story, they're happy with it because it taught them something that maybe they can use in production when they actually write the manuscript. For me, I prefer to be more efficient when I'm writing. I prefer that every minute I spend be geared toward putting words on the page and putting words on the page that are going to last and not necessarily get cut. But Michael, what happens if you write yourself into a corner and then you have to cut a bunch of words because you didn't know where you were going? That's a part of the creative process. It happens. It doesn't happen to me that often, but sure, I sometimes will write novels, and I'll find that I go down a rabbit hole, and maybe I need to backtrack a little bit because I either overwrote a chapter or I thought the character was going to go some way, and it turns out they needed to go another way. That's perfectly fine and part of the process, and I'm willing to accept that because I don't spend time outlining, I don't spend time doing character sheets, I don't spend time doing world building. I do all that stuff as I go, as I mentioned previously. So even if I have to cut some words, they're just words, and I still come out ahead compared to a lot of people who are spending a lot of time doing stuff ahead of the novel that doesn't bear any fruit anyway. So either way, I still believe this is a more efficient way. Words are going to get cut. That's part of the process, and you just have to be willing to understand that and accept it. And as soon as you find that something needs to be cut, just cut it, move on, and go to the next thing. What about story beats? Aren't you afraid that if you write without an outline that you'll miss some story beats? Not really. Is it possible that when you write a novel into the dark or without an outline that you're going to miss some story beats of the hero's journey or of some plot point method? Sure, it's possible, but I don't think readers are really going to care unless you really screw up. All right. The only exception here that I think that I would have some consternation about if I was writing it would be romance, because romance is one of those genres that really does have some very clear beats that you don't want to miss. Now, there are some that you can swap out and skip over, but there are some romance beats that you just kind of can't miss. But with science fiction and fantasy, I don't know. I think you can get away with a lot. You don't necessarily have to conform to a unified structure. And I just don't think that when readers read books, they're saying, okay, he just hit this beat now. Okay, I'm looking for the next beat. Oh, he missed the second pinch point. I'm going to put this novel away. Readers just don't think like that. They think more about how the story is affecting them organically. And I believe, and this is my belief, is that if you tell the story that your subconscious told you to tell, if you trusted yourself enough to tell the story that you heard in your head, then I wouldn't worry too much about it, because there's something to be said. Dean Wesley Smith talks about this in his book, Writing into the Dark. I have internalized this and believe it myself because I've seen it with my own eyes, with my own books, and what readers have said about my books, is that if you don't know what's going to happen, the reader won't know what's going to happen. And readers like that. They really like that. And so, like I said, I wouldn't worry too much about the story beats. I mean, if readers are saying something in your reviews that say, "Hey, this book didn't have a middle," or the book didn't end the way I thought it was going to end, or some clues that might clue you up that maybe you missed an important beat, then just take the lesson, learn it, and then apply it to the next book. So many people get hung up on, well, this book has to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. If I don't hit all these beats the right way, no one's going to buy it. All right. And the reality is that I'm just not convinced that readers think that way. Only writers stress out about stuff like that. Focus on the story itself, tell the story that you need to tell, and then publish the book, see what happens. And if you messed up, you messed up. Learn in the next book. Do I edit as I go, or am I a multiple draft writer? Now, many of you who watch this channel know that I am not a multiple draft writer. I write my novels in one draft now, and I focus on telling the story that I want to tell. Now, I have slowed down a little bit with my pace, so I focus on telling the story correctly the first time, getting the words down, and what I do is I follow a method that's called looping or cycling. And what I do is I write 500 words, and then when I get to the end of that 500 words, or a natural break in the story, I will go back and I'll reread what I wrote, and I'll fix typos. I'll read for consistency, for flow, read for anything that just doesn't make sense. I'll compare it to my outline sometimes that I just showed you. And then once I feel comfortable with that 500 words, I move on to write the next 500 words, and then I cycle back. And sometimes what I'll do, if I'm practicing a writing technique, sometimes what I'll do is I'll read the 500 word increment for like spelling and grammar and story flow, and then I'll go back and reread it again, and I'll look at any particular techniques that I was using. So if there was something that a technique that I was trying to practice, then I might focus only on that technique. Or if there's an important conversation, I might focus only on that conversation. So sometimes I might loop a particular passage twice, and then I move on. And then as I get significantly through the story, what I will also do is, as I finish a chapter, I will jump back and go to the beginning of the book and then go chapter by chapter. So this way, when I get to the end of the book, I have looped every chapter several times, not only while I was writing it, but then maybe a few chapters down the road, so that really, you technically are writing in multiple drafts if you think about it. It's just that you're more strategic about how you spend your time. And as I said, my big thing is efficiency. I think that's a little bit more efficient. But I get so many questions about editing as I go, and I just want to let people know that there's no right or wrong way to do this. Sometimes I flex and do things a little bit different from novel to novel, and I think you should too. You should try the way that I talk about in my book, try Dean Wesley Smith's method, read other people's thoughts around this, and figure out what works best for you. There is no right and there is no wrong way. You can be a one draft writer like me, or you could be somebody that does multiple drafts. I don't care. I think you just find the way that feels the most intuitive to you, and then you go from there. But what happens if you get stuck? And I don't mean like stuck in a chapter, but really stuck. This is sometimes a question that I get, because people can sometimes be afraid that they will write themselves into a corner that they won't be able to solve. And I'll just say this. I have written a lot of novels, and I've lost count in terms of how many I've written without an outline at this point. And what I will say is that there has never been a novel that I've written where I have written myself into a corner that I couldn't get my character out of. I've always figured out a way to do it. And that is likely to be true of you as well, if this is the type of writing method that resonates with you. Let me talk a little bit about something that is critically important to understanding how to write without an outline. And it has nothing to do with writing. This is really more of an exercise in faith. And I don't mean religious faith. I mean, you can certainly apply it that way if you want. But it's faith in yourself, it's faith in your ability to tell a story, and it's faith in just your writing in general. And I think a lot of writers don't have that. And in order to write a novel without an outline, it takes a lot of faith. I mean, it can be really scary. That's why Dean Wesley Smith calls this writing into the dark, because you are literally writing into the dark. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to be able to get out of it. You don't know what readers are going to think. You don't know anything. You don't know if the book is going to sell. And it takes an amazing amount of faith and confidence in yourself. And the first time that you write a novel without an outline, it's really scary. Probably one of the most terrifying experiences you'll ever have. But when you get through it and you prove to yourself that you can do it, it gives you a confidence that I just can't describe. I just can't describe it. It is an amazing level of self-awareness, and it makes writing the next book without an outline 1,000% easier. And I've talked to many people who agree with me on this. We get through the first one, and when you get through the first one, the next ones are a lot easier. But in order to do that, that takes faith. And faith is remembering to do in the dark what you were taught in the light. And that's true of writing. It's true of your religious beliefs. It's true of virtually anything in life. You know, there will be times where you feel like you're in the dark and you don't know how to get through it. And so if you've ever been through some hard times in your life, think about those as you're writing a novel. So my point is that there is no amount of advice in the world that I can give you that will help you write a novel without an outline if you don't have confidence in yourself. I can teach you how to get through the 1/3 mark. I can teach you how to outline as you go. I can teach you how to, world build and build characters and write engaging characters and writing techniques and all that stuff. But if you don't believe in yourself when you're writing a novel without an outline, then you're going to be more susceptible to quitting or more susceptible to reverting back to outlining, which is what you don't want to do if you feel like this method is for you. So you don't outline a novel at all? That's a question I get. And the answer is no, I don't outline anything at all. Well, I take that back. I do outline, but I outline as I go. So I outline after I have written a chapter. So what a lot of people will do when they outline a novel, the traditional way, is they sit down and they write what's going to happen in a chapter, and then they write what happens in the chapter. And oftentimes, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I would imagine if I could bet, it would be a very high percentage of the time, what actually ends up on the page is not what they planned. All right. So then what ends up happening is right there, that instant, the outline is out of date. It's obsolete. And I don't know a whole lot of people that go back and update their outlines after they write, because the outline is really just a tool to help them get started with the story. All right. So when you outline as you go, you do it the opposite way. You write the story, and then you write down what happened in the story. And when you do that, your outline is always 100% up to date, because how could it not be? Everything that you wrote ends up in the outline. And then you can use that for your next book to refer to when you're like, oh, what was the character wearing in chapter 5? Or what did this minor character do? I forget what he did, what he said. You can go back to your outline and reference all that. Whereas if you have a traditional outline, you may not be able to go back and 100% rely on those details. That is another very, very good reason to outline as you go. If you want more tips on how to write a novel without an outline with confidence, check out my book, The Pocket Guide to Pantsing, and you can get your copy at authorlevelup.com/pantsing. I'll also throw a link in the video description. Happy writing, and I'll talk to you in the next video.